Welcome to the Art of Growth and our panel season on Enneagram stances and attachment styles. This is the Type 9 panel. Before we get started, if you'd like to process the Enneagram and your growth journey with others on the path, consider joining the Art of Growth community. This is the best place to meet up with other Art of Growth listeners as we support each other in our becoming. You can join today at www.theartofgrowth.org. Theartofgrowth.org is also the place to take a free Enneagram test, a free Enneagram Instincts variant test, or to reach out to us for individual coaching or organizational coaching and consulting. There you can reach out to Joel Hubbard or me, Jim Zartman. In this podcast series, we build on the work we've done in other panel seasons on Enneagram type and instincts. All right, here we go.
Okay, well, welcome to the Type 9, I don't know, what do we call it? Stances and attachment styles. It's kind of a big one that we're covering this season. So we're going to have fun with this. This is another one of these research projects for us. But before we dive in, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from.
My name is Angela, and I live in Dallas, Texas.
I'm Kelly. I live in Naperville, Illinois.
And I'm Shayna. I live near Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Very cool.
Very good. Welcome. So, hey, we're going to dive right in and just start with this like attachment style and also stances, because there's something somewhat similar and yet very different between the two. So we're kind of like, how do they relate to each other? And then also, do you relate to the sort of stances and how they're usually described? So let me just start by prefacing with saying this, that nines are usually put into the withdrawing stance. And for most nines, I say that's true. That's kind of where I begin, is in that sort of withdrawing back. And stances are our attempt to get our needs met as it relates to people and how we interact with them. And so it's a strategy. Attachment styles, similar. It's a strategy for how we get our needs met. And so there are two main ones. There's like four in total, but we're going to look at the two common ones, which is the type that tend to avoid and others who are more anxiously leaning in and leaning toward, trying to get their needs met from other people. So the avoidance types tend to not. They don't want to get their needs met by other people. They avoid it as much as they can, being resourceful. And so what we wanted to do is just ask you type nines, like, talk to me about how that shows up in your life. And so let's begin with what your dominant stance is. And is there a stacking to it? Is there sort of a hierarchy? And is that context-based? So let's begin there.
This is Angela. So yes, I'm a 9 and I'm a self-preservation 9, wing 1. So definitely I start in the withdrawing stance. And I would say in most of my relationships and my experiences, I definitely start there. I would say that it is contextual though. My next would be more dependent, more toward energy that I use. And definitely in my close relationships, my secure relationships with my very close friends and my husband, I am much more quickly to move to that. But then I notice that situations where people don't necessarily know me, so I don't have a connection. So I don't have like a fear of that loss of connection that we nines tend to utilize, tend to fear. I am much more willing to go with that at energy or against, especially if people make assumptions about me or say things that, that I either disagree with or struggle with, then I am much more willing to do that. But I find I rarely use that kind of energy toward my relationships that I really care about. That's something that I have to be forced into, really.
Interesting. I wonder about for the others, if that changes because of your instinct. So I'd be curious about how that works.
Yeah, that's part of the research we're trying to figure out, because there is a context in which we've thought of this a lot with the most intimate relationships, is the context that we've really seen a lot of the classic stack work, but it does depend on instinct, but that is relatively consistent. So what you just described is what we've seen most consistently with nines, that they tend to have this withdrawing first, or their attachment style might be a little bit more avoidant, dismissive. So that withdrawing energy first. You're nodding yes, because they can't see that on the podcast. And then that toward second, like I'm going to move towards you and I want to make the connection. And then when things go really wrong is the only time I sort of hit that at space, right? Yeah. All three are nodding. So yeah, this is we have an odd one out. All right. We're gonna have a counter. We're gonna have a counter. Good. This is gonna be great. But that you're saying for you, Angela, that's your arc.
Yes, that would be my arc for sure.
Okay. So what is the context in which it doesn't look like that? You say where you might be kind of withdrawing, but you might go at second. There's a context in which you might go at second, is what you're saying?
The context when I would go at or against would be in situations where I'm not close to someone, or it's as I am a mom of two almost adult children. One has an intellectual disability and the other is gay. And so I have two kids that are like what some people would say a marginalized community. And so I have to advocate for them sometimes. And I've had to say things that I normally wouldn't step up and say to advocate for them or to act as their ally. And that's when I don't hesitate to go to that energy.
Got it.
So those would be the situations. But I also noticed too, in those situations, I usually don't fear that loss of connection that, right. Nines might have. So,
well, you're preserving the most intimate connection by doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're advocating for the most intimate connection where you really want that together toward with energy, which means I might have to bring some of that at energy externally in order to maintain that toward over here.
Definitely. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I actually can kind of echo that somewhat. I noticed that as well, that I'm definitely that withdrawing stance. That is one thing that really helped me to kind of pin down my type is I saw myself in the dependent, or I'm not sure if that's the best name for it. Do you like to call it responsive?
We call it toward.
Toward. Okay. I noticed some of that in myself as well. I knew that I wasn't in like the assertive or aggressive stance right away, typical 9. But the withdrawing was what immediately helped me just kind of land on. I knew that I was a withdrawing number because that it wasn't necessarily something I was proud of, but it's something that, it definitely happens, that withdrawal away from people to get my needs met. For me, though, I do notice some of that at or against in a situation where I don't feel that there is like a connection to potentially be at stake or anything at risk as far as like losing a relationship. Just like you said, Angela, I don't have an issue with like walking up to someone in a store and asking them for help, or if there's something that we need and we're at a restaurant, I know everybody always uses the the restaurant example with 9s, like, would you send your food back? And it's like, well, I might like do it in the nicest possible way, but like I would let someone know if there was a problem with something. In a relationship though, like if you have hurt my feelings somehow, or like, stepped on a boundary that I have, will I let you know? It depends. It totally depends on the situation. It depends on how confident I am in our relationship. It could just be how I'm feeling on the day, like that's something that I'm way less likely to like speak up about, much more likely to kind of withdraw and process.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different take. I'm a social 9, and I feel in a lot of internal conflict, I believe, because of my social instinct. And the more I'm looking into the stances and attachment styles, it's starting to make a little bit more sense to me. So I do identify with the withdrawing stance quite a bit, but I get uncomfortable in that. And to get my needs met, I feel like I much more move towards people. And then I get overwhelmed. So it's this kind of really chaotic flip-flopping back and forth between those two. And then I will use the assertive stance last. And it's usually when I need to withdraw, but somebody's not allowing me to. There's pressure on me. And then I can get pretty aggressive and bark back at people when I feel like I have nothing left to give. But I overcommit quite a bit because I feel like I do use the toward stance more than probably a typical 9. Or maybe a 9 in one of the other subtypes. So that definitely it leaves me with this like internal chaos a lot of times because I'm flip-flopping between those two, the withdrawing and the going towards people until I kind of deplete my stores of energy or resources. That's when I will flip into the assertive and kind of go at people to kind of reestablish some space so that I can come back to myself.
Is this flip-flopping internal, or do other people witness this? Do they see you withdrawing and then going toward, withdrawing, going toward?
My husband definitely sees it. He says that it's definitely like I can be in a room with people and flip. Like it's like I can just start staring off and I'm there, but I'm not there. So he can definitely tell. I don't know so much, and people that aren't necessarily as in tune or as close with me could tell, because it doesn't have to be like a physical withdrawing away from people. I can do it in the middle of a party. I can be by myself.
Sure.
There's something interesting about the social piece that you bring up, that it works against a little bit of your type. And so social nines are called the counter type of the 9. But you see this also with other withdrawing types. For example, the social 4 has that conflict as well because of the need to withdraw, but also the need to go toward, right? So it's an interesting kind of battle between the two. And so it makes a lot of sense. And for those who might be listening and saying, well, so I'm still hung up on the whole thing of like, how does withdrawing help you get your needs met within the context of a relationship? It doesn't make any sense, right? So maybe you could clarify that a little bit as to what's happening with the withdrawing stance and in what ways is it helping you meet a particular need, and then maybe how your stance is also helping to get that need met.
So what I notice is I have a deep need for connection. I need to belong. That's like a word that it has always really resonated with me. So in order to belong, I need a group of people. So I move towards people. But then I have this piece of me that so easily can just merge with other people and other people's agendas. So I have a need for connection, a need for belonging. So I move towards people for that. And then I merge, and then I feel myself losing myself, and I have a need to be my own person. So then I withdraw, and it's this kind of going in and coming out, and never like feeling totally secure with people. But then definitely once I withdraw to reestablish a sense of myself, also fearing loss of connection. So then I'm going in and out constantly.
Wow. That's very helpful.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from the other two how you see that. Have you experienced that? Do you do that differently?
I think I definitely vacillate back and forth like you do, Shane. Joel, when you asked about like how withdrawing helps us get our needs met, I've learned being married to a 4 for 25 years who processes things very quickly. He processes emotions and his thoughts very quickly. Yeah. So much so that I'm still on the first thought while he's had like 4 or 5. And I've learned that when I'm in a situation, I can almost have to step away to process it and to figure out what I think about it, how I feel about it. It's the whole shower thinking, I'm in the shower and I'm thinking. So that's how I find that I have to withdraw to then gather my own thoughts and my own feelings about it so that I don't merge too much with who I'm connecting to. So I've had to realize, okay, that's not a bad thing. That's just something that I have to do, so.
Well, that really helps, because I think someone listening who's not very familiar with the 9 or interacting with the 9 a lot, they might hear, well, you fear disconnection, but then if your first response is to withdrawing doesn't create connection. It might prevent disconnection. And that's kind of what you're describing. It's not about you fear the disconnection. And so the withdrawing prevents some of I could create this into a more of disconnection moment if I stay right now.
Very much so. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to create a further problem. So I'm going to step away and think about this and really gather my thoughts. Yeah.
Is that a bit different than from what you were saying, Shannon, which is like, I also need to reestablish who I am. Like there's a sort of coming back to the self, because you do find yourself like, kind of losing yourself in relationship with other people.
Yeah. And I think when I was younger, I didn't notice it, but the more work I've done on myself, I feel when I'm merging more, and I don't like it as much. Like I know that it leads to resentment down the road. because I lose my thoughts and opinions, and I'm expected to just go along with what other people are wanting. So I do it more as a way to prevent becoming resentful down the road.
Yeah, I can relate really well with that. You both said it really well. I do the same thing where I'm moving toward people in an attempt to establish connection or bonding or form a relationship, kind of testing the waters to see if I click with someone, or if I am, if I'm bonding with someone, if, we can form a friendship or a relationship. And in doing that, since I feel like I'm naturally kind of eager to do that, I find myself agreeing with a lot of what the other person is saying, or maybe just kind of glossing it over if I don't agree, and it's like, I won't even necessarily say anything, but I'll just kind of like go inward, just if you're not looking for it, you might miss it. But like, I'll just go inward, and it's like, wait, like I have to check in with myself. Do I think that, do I agree with that? And then I'll reflect later on, like, why did I say that? Why was I so quick to agree with that? That's not really actually what I think. So, and I won't always realize it in the moment. But again, having more time to reflect, to observe, to have done some work on myself and observe when I'm in that pattern has led me to kind of catch it more in the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. When my wife and I were first married, she's a 9, and some kind of a conflict would arise. I'm like, well, we need to talk about this, right? Like, we need to talk about this now because it just came up, and she'd be like, I'm not ready. And she'd like go back to the guest room with her journal, sometimes for a couple of hours. And I'm like, this is what is going on? This makes no sense to me. And then she could come out later and talk about it. And she had processed, she had journaled, she had gotten these thoughts. And so this makes sense to you. Like, so some people may be in a relationship with someone who has this withdrawing first, and it may not make sense to them. So what is happening in that time? What does that actually give you?
I think for me, it's just kind of clarity of thought, something about actually like putting the pen to the paper. I definitely process that way. Sometimes I will not realize that I think something or feel something until I'm actually going through the action of writing it out. It just helps me get in touch with my thoughts and feelings and true opinions on things.
Is that to avoid the merging? Because someone mentioned like wanting to prevent resentment down the road. So withdrawing to get your own thoughts so that you don't do that. Is that?
I think it could be, yes. I mean, that's a very good point, and I'm not sure if I've considered that before, but now that you mention it, yeah, I think it definitely could be like a way to kind of locate yourself in the middle of everything, all the other voices and agendas out there.
Ooh, that's a good phrase. Like, it's a way to locate yourself in the middle of everyone else's agendas.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
And I think it helps me. I'm learning the more that I'm kind of trying to plug into myself that I do know in my gut, like 9s are gut types, right? But I think I'm so disconnected from my body. I always have that gut reaction, but I've been kind of told my whole life by different voices that that's wrong. So I've kind of like learned to not trust my gut. So when I'm around other people, I'm more easily influenced to not trust myself. So for me and my husband, I much prefer to like have conflicts or just disagreements by text from different rooms because then his facial expressions, his nonverbals don't influence me. And I can sit and think about what he said for 5 minutes and really mull it over before I respond back. It's just a much more comfortable pace and environment for me to have a more real discussion because I'm not just merging or acquiescing or just kind of caving just to avoid the conflict. That's when I can kind of have my most true feelings and thoughts and opinions.
This is so important thing for everybody to hear. And I want to hear from you, Angela, about this as well. But this is so important for us to understand this about 9s because the pulling away has a strategy to it. And it's a very important strategy because of how much the 9 naturally picks up on the data around it and is influenced by the data. It's not like other types that can hear stuff and then go, I'm compartmentalizing as I'm listening. For the 9, it's absorption. So it's very difficult for you to not take that in and begin to get confused about your own internal space. Like, who am I? What do I think about something? And so the pulling away helps you to do that, to return to the self. I like that phrase, locate yourself.
I think the seeing other people's sides or thoughts or, understanding where they're coming from is very natural for us. I mean, I think I speak for myself and probably most other 9s when I say that, but knowing where I stand in the middle of all that is definitely something that I need to kind of withdraw to do. And I'm totally with you on the texting thing. I'm a texter also. Never really knew why I preferred that, written conversations or potential disagreements. But I think that has a lot to do with it. You're just less easily swayed. You're more likely to be able to really get in touch with yourself and what you think before responding. That's a really good point.
I definitely resonate with both of what Jana and Kelly said. I think for me, it's almost figuring out developing the language. It's like I have it in my head, but it's kind of mumbled and I have to parse it out. So once I have to develop the language, and to be totally honest, a little bit of confidence to be able to articulate my true wants, my true needs, what my true feelings and thoughts are, and parsing those things out and understanding that about myself so that then I can articulate it. So I think that time and that withdrawing space allows me to do that. I think too, I really resonated. I mean, what made me realize that I was a 9, I heard the very first time I heard the description of a 9 when they said 9s worry that their presence doesn't matter. That hit me hard. And so that relates to my voice mattering and, what I say to people and how I express myself matters. And so I've struggled with that my whole life, I feel like. And so I've really trying to make sure I articulate clearly what my true wants and needs are and how to resolve an argument or whatever. I want that appropriate language that really expresses how I feel. And I just need time to develop that sometimes.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I love how you said the confidence. That's definitely what alone time does for me too. I need time to think through kind of all sides of the counter arguments to what my opinion or desire is.
Totally.
Because I mean, as a 9 myself, I always view myself as the lowest one on the totem pole. My thoughts and opinions and desires, I struggled with that. I'm not as important as other people. So what I want isn't as important what other people want. So I've ignored it for so long that I haven't really fully developed my likes and preferences and desires, because why would I pay attention to it? It doesn't matter. So other people are much more confident in what they like. So if you don't have a really good kind of argument, it just feels we'll just do what you want because you care more than I care. So we'll just do what you want. So if it's something that I finally really do care about, I need that time to, you put it beautifully, to really build confidence that, this is something I'm actually passionate about and care about enough to stand up for myself.
That's also how you get your needs met, I imagine, because if you're able to articulate what it is that you really think or really want, then in that sense, then maybe you'll be heard and those needs will be met. Yeah.
It's interesting because in attachment theory, I think we were thinking of the 9 as the attachment style being that kind of dismissive or that away energy, but it really is sounding the way you're describing this is a temporary loop in order to reclaim something so that you can kind of come right back towards.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I'm like, oh, wait, so in those two middle styles, right? You have the secure and then you've got the disorganized on both opposite ends of the extreme. And then in the middle, you have the anxious preoccupied, and then you have the dismissive types. And the anxious preoccupied, again, are the ones that lean in. They're seeking to have their needs met through someone else meeting those needs. And then the dismissive types do the opposite of that. Talk to us about how that works for you, and where do you begin and where do you go? And is there sort of a back and forth?
Does it work for you? Yeah.
Does it work for you? Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I took so many quizzes to find my attachment style. And I always get so upset because I'm like, I have the bad one. I always come out as fearful avoidant. And the more I'm reading and learning about it, it rings so true for me. And I have so much shame around it because I'm like, oh no, that's the disorganized one. But it explains a lot of that conflict that I have about moving towards and then going away. So that definitely really resonates with me. And it doesn't work great because I feel like I kind of create what I don't want. Like I think I'm helping myself, but I'm actually creating all the things that I don't want to see because my moving towards and then away is really confusing, not only for myself, but for the people I'm in relationship with. And then that leads to kind of like more conflicts and more disconnection and things like that. So that's something that I'm really doing a lot of reflecting on right now.
Yeah, that's truth. And I appreciate you sharing that. That's not a comfortable thing to say, but yeah, thank you. Thank you for opening up and sharing that.
For me, I had to take a quiz too. I wasn't sure, like off the top of my head. And the quizzes that I did take, actually, though, they usually pointed to the secure style. But upon doing some further research, I realized that not many people, or it's more rare to kind of have that out of the gate. And it's usually something that we kind of progress toward with time. And that would be true for me also. I can look back over time and pretty clearly see some examples where I showed a more anxious attachment style. And just through, I guess, time and like harmony seeking in my relationship with my husband, especially, I realized that that way of relating that I had toward the beginning of our relationship was really like not serving us well in the context of that relationship. And so I think I just kind of was able, it could just be through having a secure relationship to move beyond that. But absolutely in the beginning and in some other relationships of mine, like throughout life, I can see these behaviors popping up. Things like wanting or needing validation and to be affirmed that, that we're okay, that, that I'm positively regarded by them, yet not wanting to ask for that. Like wanting to be seen and known, like desperately at times, but yet not wanting to truly engage or truly open up for fear of driving the other person away. Yeah. Trouble asserting myself and asking for what I need in relationships. Trouble with boundaries, feeling like creating a boundary or voicing one was selfish or mean. Trouble expressing my own needs, which led to resentment, essentially that he could not read my mind and know that I had those needs without me saying anything. And then often a need to like kind of put my best foot forward in a relationship, especially a new relationship, to somewhat like endear the other person to me, because I think I just subconsciously lacked the feeling that who I naturally was or already was could be enough.
Wow. Thank you.
So like when Michelle described when we did the initial one on attachment theory and the Enneagram, and most people are securely attached, but it's when we hit these moments of stress, like what comes out of us. And yeah, you described like that withdrawing, showing up in your life, but the way you're describing that has a little bit more of that anxious toward energy, which would be more consistent with the sexual energy, the sexual subtype. So you do see that showing up more. And you're kind of confirming something that we've been wondering about is like how that instinct actually makes that attachment style move. So your dominant instinct can actually make that attachment style move in the thing of like, I'm trying to create this connection. And the way you were describing, I thought I would read my mind and, things like that. Like there's a lot of that sexual energy that shows up in the way you describe that. So I think that was really helpful.
Well, self-preservation over here. I'm the avoidant. So I think I'm confirming your theory on the instincts. I would say I am in the avoidant attachment style 90% of the time. I can think of one very important relationship where I'm more of the anxious, preoccupied. I think that comes from some history of things that have happened. And so I very much want to maintain that connection. And I think maybe because of my avoidance style a long time ago, this person was very frustrated with that. So it kind of made me switch, almost. Now I'm hyper aware and I don't want to ever seem like that because this person's very sensitive about that. but all of my other close relationships, I'm definitely more of that. I feel like my husband and I have a very secure relationship, but in times of like stress, he's the anxious, preoccupied, and I'm the avoider for sure. Like I need to step away. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fascinating thing to look at, because we can see even the movement of, I need to have that connection with the 9, like I need that, but how you go about it may still have that dismissive or avoidant approach. Like I still need that. And so while I may be very much into, what can I do? How can I help you? That energy is a leaning toward kind of energy. But then there's this sort of like, however, I'm not going to actually say what it is that I need for fear that it might not be given to me, you know? And so you can see a little bit of a switch over to a little bit of the anxious preoccupied, where he's like, I need you to meet my need, and I need that to happen. But then also the switching back to, okay, that's too much. I need to pull away.
I was just going to say, I would wait and wait and wait and not say anything and not say anything and not say anything. And then suddenly it was like, I need this, like, validation or affirmation or, confirmation that we're okay. Things like that. I would like repress and repress and repress. And then finally, like, it would all come out. It wasn't good.
Yeah. 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 Well, and that's the movement towards you describing how you're part of the process, but then eventually being able to move into more of that secure style. As we move to our third question, one of the things that we're thinking about at the Art of Growth is, how do we use the stances a bit more with intentionality? Mm-hmm. How do we think about that? And this also fits with the attachment styles, is how do we, even if we have a starting point, there's nothing wrong with your starting point. And we want to make sure that we say that there's nothing wrong with your starting point, whether with attachment styles or with stances. The problem is that when we are fixed in that, and then it creates relational tension, and we don't actually get our needs met that way. So what we're looking to do is to develop a little bit more flexibility and dexterity around the stances, along with, the attachment style as well. So I'm curious, what have you learned and what are you learning at this moment in time? And we'll start there and see where this takes us.
So something that I am learning, and I will say that it was illuminating for me to look into attachment styles and kind of learn what mine was, because like you mentioned, a lot of times the 9, that is one of those types, being in the withdrawing stance, that you may kind of associate with more of the avoidant attachment. And so for me to look into and like kind of see myself in the anxious, that kind of helped me reconcile some things or explain some things. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't seem like very 9, for lack of a better term, and of course, like any type can probably have any attachment style, but just to look a little bit further into that and see, that actually what I was thinking might have been attributed to something else, I can actually explain by attachment theory. And also something that, along with that I'm learning, is that to show up in relationships fully just means, for lack of a better term, being who I truly am, being able to voice my wants and opinions and desires. And if those relationships are right for me, something I just need to keep pointing myself back to is that should create more space for both parties to like be their authentic selves. And if it's something that should be happening, if it's a good, if it's a true friendship, a true connection, true relationship, that should be well received. People should be wanting that. And so I have to remind myself of that it's okay to say those things, put myself out there a little bit. Showing up more fully helps me to stay accountable too. Because if I actually do share wants, needs, hopes, dreams, opinions, what have you, I can move from like a more resigned position or like more fatalistic, well, this is just how it's meant to be thinking. And the limitations that places on me to having accountability and doing something about it, to right action, which we need to be doing as 9s. So that's a couple things there.
Love it. Yeah. Big word that keeps resonating as you were talking about that says just engaged. Like it sounds like you're learning to engage and you're practicing it. And of course, your starting point is going to be your starting point. There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to start with that sort of Got to remind myself of this. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about you. It just means that's your starting point, right? But you're learning to practice engagement, and that's really the work of the 9. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Something that I've been learning, I'm part of the new Art of Growth community, and something that I learned from a fellow 9 in that group is honesty. So when I'm merging and when I'm not showing up fully as myself for fear of disconnection, I'm not being honest, and I'm not really even being a full person. And in unhealth, I just sometimes get, like you said, Kelly, in this really fatalistic, like, all this is wrong and it's on me to take care of it. I have to bear the burden of all this so that everyone around me can be comfortable. But I have to wake up, and I wasn't created to endure all of this discomfort to make everyone around me comfortable. I have a place here too. And it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable because that's relationships. We're going to have disagreements and things, but that doesn't have to be the end of the world. And I can be honest and I can show up as myself, and the people that are meant to be in my life will stay. And the ones that were really not treating me kindly in the first place will go. And then I'll find a truer peace instead of this like duct tape together piece that I'm trying to like really protect and preserve. That's actually not even really all that comfortable. Then I can kind of create an environment where I belong instead of trying to fit myself in all of these other places.
Preach. Preach, sister.
Good.
I think a lot of 9s needed to hear that. That's really good.
I can definitely echo that. When you said about honesty, I think that was one of the very first things I realized about myself when I started on this Enneagram journey about 6 years ago, that I was not being honest with myself. And I wasn't being honest with others too, in letting them assume that I agreed with them about things, or that I, shared the same thoughts, because we can see multiple sides. I was wrestling with things. And so I didn't quite just land on this side of the argument, all the time. And I had to learn to speak up. I think I also had to learn to acknowledge to myself and to others that I need time to figure out what I want to express, what I feel, what I need, and just saying that out loud rather than just being quiet or going with the flow. Just acknowledging that that's something that I need to figure out before I can express what I need and want. So learning to take that time for myself. And I've definitely learned too, as I'm now starting to learn about attachment theory and understanding that a little bit better, that avoidance style, it's okay to start there, but now where do I go with it? And I think that it's moving into that more 2 energy in our stances. Like I think I get more positive results when I'm, especially with my close relationships. So how do I take myself out of that avoidance, style, and then start to get more comfortable with moving towards people, or even that and using that against energy when I need to.
It's really good.
Angela, I love how you said just acknowledging that you need more time, because I was raised in a family with a lot of more aggressive stance people. So I've, over the years, just held a lot of shame about thinking that being a slower processor, there's something wrong with that. So I've been doing a lot of work on seeing that, going too fast isn't a great thing either. So there's nothing wrong with the way I process information. It just is what it is. And just being able to say, you know what, let me think about it and I'll get back to you, rather than just automatically saying yes, has helped me a ton.
Yeah.
Definitely releasing that shame. That took a lot for me too. I definitely felt that same feeling over it, and acknowledging like, oh, okay, this is just who I am, and I need to, it's okay,
Yeah. And as a fast thinker, I've had other types point out to me that, hey, fast is not thorough. Fast is not necessarily thorough. You did not really consider all of the different sides. So it's like, that's what you're doing, is you have this thing. It's not that it's processing slow. It's wanting to really see these different aspects of it and understanding it. And the 9 is seen as like that. I can see from every perspective except my own sometimes. So it takes me time to see my own perspective. I have to look at these other perspectives. I actually do take in the emotions and the headspace, and I'm looking at bodies. So there is a lot of stuff that you're taking in and processing as 9s. So it makes a lot of sense. So no, I really appreciate that.
I had a 9 say to me, I think this was like a text or something, but like articulating to me everything that was going on inside them as they were thinking about a response to somebody that had done something. I responded with a simple text of saying, wow, that's exhausting. They're like, yeah, that's what it's like being me. But all of this stuff that you're going through that a lot of others like myself, we don't, that's what makes it seem fast, is we don't just take in that data. So as Jim said, really good. And I think as we wrap this time up together, the ability to do that, to pull back and withdraw so that you can tune into yourself. And the same time, the re-engagement that you described, that all three of you described, the intentionality and re-engagement is your ability, and you're describing the movement of the stances. So I'm just saying what it is that you're actually doing, which is really great. That is, you're moving from, yes, I can be in that more avoidant away starting point as my stance, and my attachment style may be that, sometimes maybe more preoccupied and anxious. But what I'm doing is I'm recognizing I'm starting there, and then sometimes can go toward really fast and lean toward people if I'm feeling like I want to connect and make that connection. But that pulling away so that you can say what it is you want and need is exactly what the goal of secure attachment is, right? You're able to articulate your needs, you're able to receive, you're able to give. And in the stances, you're able to go to the at or the against stance. And the against stance is not just the aggressive, angry against, it's the ability to say no. It's the ability to set boundaries, which is what you're doing. And so that's the nimbleness, that's the dexterity, that's the fluidity that we're talking about around the stances, and that you so very well articulated.
Yeah, and this is extremely helpful. This is our first recording, so I'm not sure what order these are going to come out on the podcast. But just what I'm seeing tonight is like there's different attachment styles. They're all 9s. There's different attachment styles. And at least in this panel, they sounded more connected to the instinct. But then your stance stack still was consistent with the 9. And it was like the stance stack was a strategy to get the attachment style and type needs met. So I'll be interested to see how this kind of shakes out. But to Joel's point, I think where we're hoping to go with all of this is we all eventually want to get to that with energy. So I am with you. So I know when do I need to apply at or against, because I need to challenge. I need to maybe preserve the connection to an intimate loved one by advocating for someone. When do I need to apply that toward energy? Because I'm going to be a creator of connection, right? And then where do I need to withdraw? Because I need to create the space for myself to remember, to come back to see where I am in this mix. So yeah, everything you said, I just feel like I've learned a lot. I'm like really trying to learn and pay attention. I think this is really contributing to how we understand attachment style and how we understand how this is connected to our type, our instinct, and our stance stack. So this is really, really helpful, and I'm so appreciative of all of you tonight.
Thanks for listening to this episode. You can follow us on social media or sign up for our newsletter at theartofgrowth.org. You can also go there to sign up for the community or to reach out to us for coaching. But hey, since you're here, why not stick around for another episode? Grace and growth, my friends.